The sun barely peeked over Benin City when Isiosa's mom kicked off her morning routine, opening the windows to let in that fresh, crisp air, sweeping the living room until it sparkled, and whispering quiet prayers for her youngest child. You know, she always said being the last-born meant Isiosa had all the perks but also the least discipline. It's like she was the baby of the family, but with all that freedom came a whole lot of expectations. At 19, Isiosa was the one everyone had high hopes for, yet she was also the one who listened the least. Can you relate? Growing up with older siblings shaped her in ways that were both good and bad. By the time she hit 13, her brothers and sisters were already off chasing their dreams: education, marriage, work. Her closest sibling, Osesu, was 7 years older, and they hardly shared anything. No clothes, no secrets, not even a real sisterly bond. Osesu was too busy with university while Isiosa was figuring out her teenage years, and by the time Isiosa was ready to connect, Osesu was already married. So, you can imagine how Isiosa kinda grew up feeling alone, right? Her parents, both teachers, were loving but strict. They believed in structure, responsibility, and a woman's reputation. But Isiosa? She believed in living life on her own terms. She wasn't rude, just stubborn, in that quiet way where she pretended to listen but was really plotting to do the opposite. You know how it is when you feel like you have to rebel just a little? Stay away from men, her dad would say every time she dressed up a little too nice for a casual outing. You can picture it, right? The concerned dad look, the stern voice. Yes, sir, she'd reply, even though she had plans to meet someone. Focus on your future. Look at your sister. She married a good man. Her mom would chime in, with that motherly wisdom that sometimes feels more like pressure. Yes, ma, she'd say, scrolling through her phone, replying to messages from the same guy she was told to avoid. It's like they didn't even realize how much the world had changed since they were young. Her parents thought she was naive. But Isiosa wasn't naive. She just felt misunderstood. She was young, beautiful, and full of life. Her almond-shaped eyes, smooth brown skin, and slim figure turned heads everywhere she went. She loved the attention. It made her feel powerful, something she never really felt growing up in the shadows of her older siblings. Everyone had expectations for her, but she wanted to carve her own path. That's how she met the two guys who would change everything for her. At first, she didn't see it as danger. She saw it as freedom. Being the last-born meant she was the first in the family to navigate a world bursting with social media, independence, and temptation. Her parents didn't get what it was like to be 19 in the age of instant messaging and quick relationships. And since she was the only one left at home, her parents kept a close eye on her, calling her phone whenever she was late, asking who she was with, questioning her outfits. She hated it. She wanted to breathe. Sometimes, late at night, she'd lie on her bed and daydream about what life would be like if she lived alone, far away from all the rules and lectures. In her mind, adulthood meant one thing: doing whatever she wanted without needing to explain herself. So when different guys started showing interest in her, she didn't feel guilty. She felt grown. She loved the feeling of being wanted, admired, and cared for. Soon, that craving for attention, and her struggle to pick just one guy, put her on a path her parents had tried to steer her away from. But Isiosa didn't know that yet. All she knew was that she was 19, beautiful, and free. And the world in front of her felt vast enough to make her believe every mistake she was about to make wouldn't matter. She had no idea that choices, once made, could reshape destinies. And hers was about to change forever. Isiosa met Tade first. It was a humid Saturday evening at a friend's birthday party. She hadn't even planned to go. Her mom wanted her to stay home and help with cooking, but her friend begged her until she finally gave in. As soon as she stepped into the small but lively yard, her beauty grabbed attention like a magnet. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and all eyes are on you? That was Isiosa. Tate noticed her right away. He wasn't loud or flashy like some of the other guys at the party. He just watched her from across the yard, smiling softly while sipping his drink. There was something mature about his confidence. He didn't rush over. He waited until she was alone, grabbing a soft drink before approaching with a friendly greeting. "Hi, I'm Tate. Haven't seen you around here before." That's how it all started. Simple, calm, and respectful. Tate was 27, running a small but growing business. He wasn't showy, but he had money and stability. He dressed well, spoke well, and carried himself with a relaxed assurance that made people trust him. He had the kind of life Isiosa's parents dreamed of for her: clean, steady, secure. He treated her with a gentleness she wasn't used to. He'd check in on her, send her money when she needed it, and always asked for her consent before making plans. He never pressured her, never raised his voice, never challenged her choices. And somehow, that gentle stability sometimes bored her. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes you crave a little excitement, a little chaos to shake things up. A few months after meeting Tade, she crossed paths with Emeka, the complete opposite. She met him at a roadside food joint near her school. She was there to grab spaghetti and fried fish after a long day, and he happened to be at the same table because of the crowd. He cracked a joke about the food being too spicy, and she laughed harder than she expected. Where Tade was calm, Emeka was fire. Where Tade was gentle, Emeka was bold. Where Tade offered comfort, Emeka offered excitement. It was like night and day, and Isiosa was drawn to the thrill of it all. Emeka had this magnetic energy that made everything feel alive. He was the kind of guy who would pull you into an adventure without a second thought. You could tell he was the life of the party, always making people laugh and feel good. He had a wild streak that made her heart race, and she found herself wanting to be around him more and more. As they spent time together, Isiosa felt herself transforming. With Emeka, she felt like she could be herself, unfiltered and free. He didn't care about her parents' expectations or the rules that had been placed on her. He wanted to know her, the real her, not just the perfect daughter or the pretty girl. But here's the thing. The more time she spent with Emeka, the more she found herself torn between the stability Tade offered and the thrill Emeka brought into her life. It was like being caught in a whirlwind, and she was loving every second of it. Every late-night conversation with Emeka felt electric, filled with laughter and plans that made her heart race. They'd talk about everything and nothing, sharing dreams and secrets under the stars. He made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt before. But then, there were the moments with Tade, where she felt safe and cared for. He was reliable, always there to support her when she needed it. He'd remind her of her goals and aspirations, and for a moment, she could picture a future with him, a future that looked stable and secure. Yet, deep down, Isiosa craved more than just security. She wanted passion, excitement, and the kind of love that made her feel like she was flying. It was a struggle she never anticipated, and the choices ahead felt daunting. You see, Isiosa was at a crossroads. On one hand, there was Tade, the steady and reliable guy who represented everything her parents wanted for her. On the other hand, there was Emeka, the wild card who made her heart race and her spirit soar. As she navigated this new chapter in her life, Isiosa realized that she had to make a choice. But the question was, which path would she choose? Would she go for the comfort of stability, or would she dive headfirst into the unknown, chasing the thrill of her desires? And just like that, the story of Isiosa was unfolding, full of twists and turns, love and heartache, freedom and responsibility. The world was her oyster, and she was ready to explore every corner of it, even if it meant facing the consequences of her choices. So what do you think? Will Isiosa find her way, or will she get lost in the whirlwind of her desires? The journey is just beginning, and it's bound to be one wild ride. Isiosa found herself caught in a whirlwind, juggling two guys, two worlds, and two completely different versions of herself. On one side, there was Tade. He was the kind of guy her parents would have absolutely loved for her. Stable, caring, and responsible. Tade had a solid job, a nice car, and a future all mapped out that included her in every step. He treated her like royalty, sending her money for her hair, data, and all those little things that made life easier. Honestly, he made sure she was always comfortable, and with him, she felt safe. He represented a secure future, a life free from worries. And who wouldn't want that, right? But then there was Emeka. Oh boy, Emeka was a whole different vibe. He lived in a tiny, crowded room and hustled every single day just to get by. No car, no savings, and definitely no fancy clothes. But what he lacked in material stuff, he made up for with charm. He was funny, charismatic, and had this incredible way of making her feel truly alive. When she was with Emeka, she wasn't just some pampered kid. She was a woman, desired, adored, and completely understood. The passion with him was like a fire she couldn't ignore, and that thrill was intoxicating. Logically, it didn't make sense, right? I mean, she was dating two guys at once, and deep down, she knew it was wrong. A little voice whispered that this couldn't last forever. But come on, emotions don't really care about logic, do they? She spent her weekdays juggling both of them, living in a constant state of emotional whiplash. It was exhausting, yet exhilarating. The weirdest part? Whenever Tate sent her money, she'd feel this strange urge take over. It was like clockwork. She'd find herself at the market, picking up rice, tomatoes, and meat, then heading straight to Emeka's place to cook for him. It was like she was using the resources from her safe world to feed the passion in her secret one. And honestly, that felt so thrilling. It was a little twisted, but she couldn't help it. Her best friend, Ivy, saw the disaster waiting to happen. One afternoon, she sat down with Isiosa, her expression serious. "Essay, this is dangerous," she warned. "You can't keep two guys like this. One day, it's all going to blow up in your face." But Isiosa just shrugged it off, convinced she had everything under control. "Nothing will happen," she'd say. "I know what I'm doing." But did she really? Every time she tried to think clearly, she'd justify her actions. She was young, just exploring, and besides, neither of them had caught her yet. This delicate balancing act became her new normal. She was living two separate lives, one polished and presentable in the daylight, and the other reckless and thrilling in the shadows. And she was getting pretty good at it. Her mornings were a perfect summary of her dilemma. She'd wake up to two good morning messages. The first, from Tade, would be long and caring, asking about her dreams and reminding her to eat breakfast. It made her feel cherished, like she was the most important person in his life. The second, from Emeka, would be short and playful. "Wake up, Jer. I day hungry." That one gave her a jolt of excitement, a reminder of the spark they shared. Together, those messages made her feel completely and utterly wanted. But desire is a tricky guide. It can blind you to the consequences creeping closer and closer. Isiosa didn't feel guilty. She felt powerful, in control. On the days Tate sent her money, she'd thank him sweetly, her voice dripping with gratitude. Then, she'd take a chunk of that cash and disappear into the world she kept hidden. She'd throw on some simple shorts and a t-shirt, and walk confidently down the dusty path to Emeka's one-room apartment. She didn't try to hide. It was like this part of her life was so separate, it couldn't possibly collide with the other. When she knocked on his door, Emeka's familiar voice would shout from inside, "Hold on, I day come," and he'd open it with that crooked smile she adored. His room was sparse, just a bed, a noisy fan, and a small speaker. But to Isiosa, it was a sanctuary. It was the one place she could be herself, without any expectations. She wasn't the last-born everyone watched over. She was just a girl, cooking for a man she was drawn to, listening to him talk about his day carrying cement bags at a construction site. And he always made her laugh. Ivy tried again to get through to her. "Essay," she said, her voice serious. "You're playing with fire. Tate is serious about you. He talks about marriage. And Emeka, you know he has nothing to offer you right now. You have to choose." Isiosa just tore a leaf into tiny pieces, unable to give a straight answer. "I don't know," she muttered. "I love them differently." Ivy sighed. "But love isn't about being in two places at once, Essay." And that hit her hard. She knew Ivy was right, but how could she choose? Tade represented stability, a life her parents would approve of, while Emeka represented the wild, untamed freedom her heart craved. Meanwhile, of the two guys, it was Tade who was falling the hardest. The more time he spent with her, the more convinced he became that she was the one. He started talking about their future together, about marriage, about moving to a better apartment. He was building a future for them, completely unaware that her heart was divided. Every time Isiosa thought about ending things with Emeka, her heart physically resisted. He felt so real, so genuine. His simple, ordinary life was a breath of fresh air, and she was caught between two worlds. The reality was that this wasn't just a love triangle. It was a ticking time bomb. The longer she kept both relationships going, the more complicated things became. She found herself constantly on edge, waiting for the moment when everything would come crashing down. The little lies she told herself started to pile up, and the weight of her secret life felt heavier every day. As time went on, Isiosa noticed subtle changes in both guys. Tate became more affectionate, showering her with gifts and sweet messages. He was clearly in love, and that made her feel guilty. On the flip side, Emeka started to get restless. He wanted more than just stolen moments. He wanted her to be all in. The pressure was building, and Isiosa felt like she was teetering on the edge of a cliff. One evening, as she sat in Emeka's room, cooking a simple meal, the atmosphere shifted. Emeka looked at her with a seriousness she hadn't seen before. "Essay, I want to know where this is going. I can't keep pretending like everything is fine when I want you to be mine, fully." His words hit her like a ton of bricks. She could see the hope in his eyes, and it terrified her. She had to face the truth. She was living a lie. But how could she break it to either of them? The thought of hurting Tade, who had been nothing but good to her, was unbearable. And the idea of losing the wild, passionate connection she had with Emeka felt like losing a part of herself. That night, as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the weight of her choices pressed down on her. She couldn't keep living this double life. Something had to give. But how do you choose between stability and passion? Between the safe road and the thrilling adventure? The next few days were a blur of anxiety and indecision. Tade continued to shower her with affection, while Emeka grew increasingly frustrated with the lack of clarity. Isiosa felt like she was being pulled in two directions, and every time she thought she had made a decision, her heart would waver. Finally, she knew she had to confront the truth. She couldn't keep stringing them along. It was time to make a choice, and she needed to do it before the inevitable storm hit. The question was, which world would she choose? The secure, comfortable life with Tade, or the fiery, unpredictable passion with Emeka? As she sat down with Ivy again, she took a deep breath. "I think I'm ready to decide," she said, her voice shaking slightly. Ivy looked at her with a mix of concern and encouragement. "Just remember, whatever you choose, you have to be honest with yourself and with them. No more lies." Isiosa nodded, feeling a mix of fear and relief. It was time to face the music. The storm was coming, and she had to be ready for whatever it brought. The story was no longer just about which guy she would choose. It was about the inevitable consequences of wanting them both, and the journey of self-discovery that lay ahead. Isiosa didn't say a word. Deep down, she knew she wasn't really making a choice. She was just putting off the inevitable. You know that feeling when you're stuck in a loop? Thinking you've got everything under control? That was her. As long as she managed her time perfectly and stayed careful, nothing bad could happen, right? It was like she was juggling two different worlds, and she was the only one who could slip between them. But let's be real, the lies were piling up, getting heavier every single day. Tade started asking more questions, and you could hear the shift in his voice. What used to be filled with trust now had a hint of suspicion creeping in. "Why didn't you pick up earlier?" he'd ask, eyebrows furrowed. "How come you're always busy in the evenings? Who were you talking to when I called just now?" For every question, Isiosa had a quick answer ready, a new excuse she pulled out of thin air. It was almost like she had a script memorized. "Oh, sorry, I was sweeping, didn't hear the phone. My phone was charging in the other room. My mom sent me on an errand. I was in class, you know how it is." And Tate believed her. Or at least, he wanted to. Love has this funny way of making you see what you want, even when that little voice in your head is screaming that something's off. Meanwhile, her connection with Emeka was growing deeper, and it was a different kind of connection. He wasn't the type to shower her with flowery words or grand gestures. His feelings were quiet, but ran deep. Every time she visited him, his eyes lit up in a way that spoke volumes, a silent welcome, a quiet celebration of her presence. Sometimes, he'd hold her hand just a little longer than necessary, his thumb tracing small circles on her skin. Other times, he'd ask about her day, not just as a casual question, but with genuine interest that made her feel truly seen. You know that feeling when someone really cares about what you're saying? It was like that. Late at night, when the world was quiet, he'd turn to her and softly say in that mix of pidgin and English she adored, "I know no weddin' you see for me, but I'm happy say you day my life." Those words felt like a warm blanket on a cold night, wrapping around her heart and making her feel chosen, needed. And that's how the addiction started. She became hooked on the feeling of being important to two different men for two completely different reasons. With Tade, she was the sophisticated, university-educated girlfriend. With Emeka, she was the down-to-earth girl he felt lucky to have. She was living two lives, and she was the star of both. Back at home, the changes in her weren't going unnoticed. A new glow seemed to radiate from her, an extra spring in her step. Her mom, with her keen maternal instinct, picked up on it right away. "Essay, are you seeing somebody?" she asked one evening, her eyes searching Isiosa's face for the truth. For a split second, Isiosa froze. The question hit too close to home. But she quickly recovered, putting on her most innocent smile. "No, Mummy. I'm just happy," she lied, the word feeling strange on her tongue. Her dad, a man of few words who rarely got involved in such matters, simply watched her from his chair. He didn't say anything directly to her, but later that night, she overheard him talking to her mom. His voice was low and heavy. "She thinks she is wise," he said. "But life has a way of teaching those who refuse to listen." Isiosa didn't hear that conversation, and even if she had, she probably wouldn't have listened. She was floating on a cloud of her own making, convinced she was untouchable. Consequences? Fate? Guilt? Those were for other people, for careless people. As long as she stayed careful, her two worlds would never collide. But secrets aren't like seeds. You can't bury them in the ground and expect them to stay quiet forever. No, secrets are more like stubborn weeds. They grow in the dark, spreading their roots and tangling everything beneath the surface. They wait patiently, silently, for the right season to break through the soil and expose everything. Isiosa didn't know it yet, but the quiet storm she had created was slowly gathering strength on the horizon. And when it finally broke, nothing in her life would ever be the same again. Then December arrived, bringing the familiar magic of the festive season. The air turned crisp with the Harmattan breeze, and dry, golden leaves rustled along the streets. You could hear children rehearsing their Christmas carols, their cheerful voices carried on the wind. Neighbors who had been away in the big cities all year started returning, their cars packed to the roof with luggage and gifts. Isiosa had been looking forward to the holidays, but for entirely different reasons than her parents. For them, Christmas was all about family, tradition, and faith. For her, it was a major inconvenience. Her parents had been talking about their trip to the village for weeks. It was an annual ritual. Every December, they traveled back to their hometown in Edo State for family reunions and end-of-year prayer meetings. For as long as Isiosa could remember, she had been dragged along on these trips. Now that her older siblings were grown and married with their own families, she was the last one left to endure the annual pilgrimage. She complained, of course. She tried every excuse she could think of. "Mummy, why must I go this year? I have things to do here in the city." Her mother's face hardened into a frown. "Which things?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "Paid." Isiosa quickly looked away, avoiding her mother's gaze. "No, it's not about him. I don't want to go." But the argument was cut short by her father's booming voice from the living room. "You're going." That was it. 2 words, and the matter was closed. There was no arguing with that tone. On the morning of the trip, Isiosa moved around the house like she was wading through thick mud. She packed her bags at a snail's pace, hoping to delay the inevitable. Her mother kept bustling around her, urging her to move faster, complaining that her father hated traveling late. None of S.A.'s siblings were coming. They all had their own families to spend the holidays with. So once again, it was just her, her parents, and the long road ahead. She'd never admit it out loud, but a part of her already missed both Tade and Emeka. They had both called her the night before, each completely unaware of the other's existence in her life. Tade's voice was warm and concerned. "Please travel safely, okay? Don't forget to send me pictures when you get there." Emeka's tone was more playful, but just as affectionate. "Call me when you land for village. I go miss you small." She giggled at both messages, her heart swelling with that familiar feeling of being important, of being chosen. But now, as she squeezed into the back seat of her father's car, surrounded by bags of rice, groundnut oil, and Christmas clothes, that feeling was replaced by irritation. The journey felt endless. The roads were dusty and bumpy, shaking the car relentlessly. There were countless police checkpoints where her father had to argue and bargain. The traffic in every small town they passed through was maddening. All the while, her mother sat in the front seat, praying loudly for journey mercies. Her father gripped the steering wheel, muttering complaints about the bad roads and reckless drivers. And Isiosa just stared at her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen, desperately waiting for the network bars to reappear so she could reply to her messages. The city, and the 2 lives she had built there, felt a million miles away. As they drove on, Memories of her life in the city flooded her mind. The late-night study sessions with Tade, the laughter they shared over silly jokes, and those deep conversations that made her feel like they could conquer the world together. Then there was Emeka, with his warm, genuine laughter and the way he made her feel so grounded. It was a beautiful mess, and she was caught right in the middle of it. The scenery outside the car window shifted from bustling city life to the serene countryside. The vibrant greens of the fields, the distant hills, and the occasional sight of a farmer tending to his crops brought a sense of nostalgia. It reminded her of her childhood, of simpler times when life was less complicated. But now, with the weight of her secrets pressing down on her, that nostalgia felt bittersweet. They finally reached the village, and the familiar sights hit her like a wave. The dusty roads, the small huts, and the scent of jollof rice wafting through the air as neighbors prepared for the festivities. It was a stark contrast to the urban life she was used to, but there was a warmth in the familiarity that tugged at her heart. As they pulled into her grandparents' compound, Isiosa felt a mix of excitement and dread. Family members were already gathered, laughing and catching up. Hugs were exchanged, and she was enveloped in a whirlwind of affection. But in the back of her mind, she couldn't shake the feeling of being an imposter, hiding her true self from everyone around her. That night, the village hit her with a wave of noise, like a splash of cold water on a sleepy morning. Kids were shouting and running around, their laughter ringing in her ears. Aunties wrapped her in tight hugs, squeezing her so much that she could barely breathe. Uncles called her Big Girl with pride, while neighbors gossiped away, sharing stories that felt both familiar and overwhelming. The family compound was already bursting at the seams with relatives who had come early, each one eager to see the last born, the city girl, the beautiful daughter of teacher Osifo. It was a lot, really. She managed a polite smile through it all, even when she didn't quite feel like it. There was this pressure to be the perfect daughter, the one everyone adored. But honestly, it was exhausting. But the nights in the village? They were the absolute worst. The silence was deafening, wrapping around her like a heavy blanket. The darkness felt thick, only broken by the distant hum of a generator, which felt like a cruel reminder of the city life she was missing. It made her feel so incredibly lonely. Lying on a thin mattress, staring at the ceiling while her parents slept peacefully in the next room. She felt trapped in a world that was supposed to feel like home, but didn't. There was nothing to distract her here. No city lights painting the sky, no friends to call, nowhere to go. And worst of all, no Tade, no Emeka. Her mind couldn't escape them. It wandered to them constantly, like a moth drawn to a flame. She found herself scrolling through old chat messages, staring at their pictures saved on her phone, wishing she could just reach out and feel their presence again. Sometimes, when the night breeze felt a little too cold, she'd hug her pillow tight and wish she was back in the city, back in the life that was truly hers. It wasn't just about the noise or the lights. It was about the connection, the energy, the thrill of being surrounded by people who understood her. By the fourth night, a deep restlessness had completely taken over her. She missed being touched, being held, being looked at with admiration. She missed the constant affection she was so used to getting in the city. Those little moments, a hand on her back, a warm hug, a glance that lingered just a second too long, were like lifelines for her. She missed the attention from the two men who made her feel so alive, who brought out parts of her she didn't even know existed. She tried to reason with herself, telling herself it wasn't her fault. She was just lonely. She was just bored. She'd be fine as soon as she got back home. But deep down, a craving was starting to grow, a feeling she couldn't possibly explain to anyone. It was like a hunger, gnawing at her insides. She'd close her eyes and imagine returning to the city, seeing Tade first, feeling his strong arms wrap around her. She remembered the gentle way he smiled whenever he saw her, that smile that could light up even the darkest days. Then, her thoughts would drift to Emeka, the way he looked at her with such raw, untamed intensity, as if he could see right through her. Those thoughts alone were enough to light a fire inside her, making her heart race with anticipation. She'd press a pillow to her chest and whisper into the darkness, "Let this Christmas just end already." Every morning, she'd wake up and cross another day off the small calendar she'd brought with her. Her mother noticed her growing impatience and just laughed. "Essay, your body is here, But your mind is already in Benin, she teased, her eyes sparkling with mischief. S.A. would just smile, trying her best to hide the real truth behind her restlessness. Her father would shake his head and say, "Young girls, always in a rush." But it wasn't just impatience. It was a yearning for something more, something she couldn't quite articulate. Christmas Day was loud and festive, filled with mountains of jollof rice, the crackle of firecrackers, and long family prayers that seemed to stretch on forever. But Essay was only half there. She went through the motions, but her heart wasn't in it. Her mind, her desires, they were all waiting for the trip back to the city. She knew exactly what she wanted to do the moment she got home, the moment the car parked, the moment she unpacked her bags. She already knew the first place she would go, the first person she would see, the first door she would knock on. And she knew, deep down, that it wouldn't stop with just one person. When the holiday finally ended and they started loading the car to head back home, Isiosa felt a powerful rush of excitement surge through her veins. The closer they got to the city, the faster her heart beat. Her parents just thought she was eager to get back to her normal life, her studies, her friends. But the truth was so much deeper than that. She was eager to return to the two different worlds she had been missing so badly. The two men she had left behind. The two men she truly believed she could manage. She had no idea that the decisions she was about to make, all within the first 24 hours of her return, would end up shaping her destiny in ways she could never, ever have predicted. The day they got back to Benin, the sky was unusually bright, almost like it was welcoming her home. Even the familiar city noise, the hum of traffic and people, sounded like a welcome home song just for her. As her father drove through the gates of their compound, a thrill ran through Isiosa's body. Finally, freedom again. Her parents moved slowly, unloading the luggage, greeting neighbors, complaining about the long and tiring trip. But Isiosa's mind was already miles away, racing ahead to the possibilities waiting for her. She rushed straight to her room, dropped her bag on the floor, and immediately grabbed her phone. The network signal was back. Messages flooded in, and her heart skipped a beat. The first one was from Tade. "Hope you're close to the city? I can't wait to see you." A smile spread across her face, the kind of smile she had missed so much during her days in the village. And then, one from Emeka. "Baby girl, you done lost don't forget me, Sha." She took a quick shower, applied some light makeup, and pulled on a fitted top and jeans that hugged her curves just right. She walked out to the living room and told her mother, "Mummy, I'm going to see Ivy." Her mother, too tired from the trip to argue, just nodded. Within 30 minutes, she was standing at Tade's front door. He opened it with a wide, happy grin, pulling her into a warm hug before she could even say a word. "I missed you," he whispered into her hair, and she could feel the sincerity in his voice. "I missed you too," she said back, and she meant it, but not completely. They spent hours just talking, laughing, catching up on everything they'd missed. Tade kept touching her face gently, as if he needed to make sure she was really there, in front of him. He had bought her food, snacks, and even had a small gift for her, a beautiful necklace he'd saved to surprise her with. She felt special. She felt safe. She felt wanted. Everything seemed perfect, except for that ache that was still lingering inside her. That hunger she had been carrying with her since Christmas. That craving the village silence could not satisfy. Even after they shared intimate moments, the feeling didn't go away. In fact, it only grew stronger. Tade was everything good and gentle and kind, but she still felt a familiar emptiness inside. A longing for something rougher, something wilder, something unpredictable. A longing that only one person could satisfy. Emeka. The need was a constant hum beneath her skin, a reminder of the other side of her life that she couldn't ignore. As she lay beside Tade, his arm draped protectively over her, she should have felt content. And a part of her did. But another part, a louder, more insistent part, was already planning her next move. She checked the time on her phone. It was getting late, but not too late. She gently slipped out of Tade's embrace. "I should get going," she said softly, trying to mask the urgency in her voice. "My parents will be wondering where I am." He looked disappointed but understood. "Okay," he said, kissing her forehead, a sweet gesture that sent butterflies fluttering in her stomach. "Call me when you get home." "Of course," she promised, a promise she had no intention of keeping right away. The moment she stepped out into the cool night air, she felt a fresh wave of energy wash over her. The guilt was there, a small whisper in the back of her mind, but the anticipation was louder. She didn't go home. Instead, she ordered a ride and typed in another address, Emika's address. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear and excitement. This was reckless. This was risky. This was exactly what she wanted. When she got to Emika's place, she didn't even need to knock. He must have seen her ride pull up. The door swung open, and there he was, leaning against the frame with a lazy, knowing smirk on his face that sent shivers down her spine. He didn't say, "I missed you." He didn't pull her into a gentle hug. The excuse. As evening rolled in, she suddenly stood up, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves bubbling inside her. "I need to go," she said, trying to sound casual but knowing her heart was racing. Tate looked surprised, his brow furrowing slightly. "So quick? Stay a little longer, okay?" "I can't," she replied, avoiding his gaze like it was the most challenging thing in the world. "I'm meeting an old friend, someone from my secondary school. She just got back to town." It was a lie, a little white one that felt heavy on her chest. Not a blink, not a flinch from Tate. He simply nodded, his trust in her so evident. "Okay, be safe. And please call me when you get home." "I will," she said smoothly, trying to sound reassuring. But inside, she was buzzing with a mix of guilt and thrill. She stepped out of the house, her heart racing, not with guilt, but with excitement that felt electric. Heading to Emika, the moment she left Tade Street, she hailed a bike and gave the driver Emika's address. The air was warm, and she didn't care that her hair was a bit messy or that her makeup had faded. She knew Emika wouldn't mind. He never did. As the bike zipped through the streets, weaving in and out of traffic, she felt that rush again. The thrilling, addictive feeling only Emika brought her. It was like a secret world just waiting for her, and she couldn't get enough of it. When she reached his area, the dusty street welcomed her with familiar sights. The loud music from a nearby kiosk and the aroma of frying akara wrapped around her like a warm blanket, making her feel at home. She knocked on his door once, her heart pounding with anticipation. "Who be that?" Emika's voice called from inside, playful and teasing. "It's me," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. He opened the door with a half-smile that quickly blossomed into excitement, lighting up his face. Look who finally remembered me," he teased, pulling her inside with a grin that made her heart skip a beat. The reunion she had craved. Being with Emika felt like fire to her, wild, unfiltered, and intense. It was everything she craved but couldn't find with Tade. She let all the cravings she had bottled up for weeks spill out freely, and it felt liberating. Afterwards, she lay on his bed, breathless, her heart racing with a mix of satisfaction and relief. This was what she had been missing, what she couldn't get from Tade. It overwhelmed her and made her forget everything else, even the little voice in her head reminding her of her double life. Emika looked at her with a smile, brushing her arm lightly. "You day enjoy me too much," he joked, his eyes sparkling with mischief. She laughed, playfully hitting him on the shoulder, feeling lighter than air. Before she left, she reached into her bag and handed him some money, a gesture of care and practicality. "For food," she said, smiling. Emika didn't pretend to reject it. He needed it, and she knew. He smiled and kissed her forehead, a sweet gesture that sent warmth through her. "Thank you, my girl. No go forget me again, oh." "I won't," she replied, though in her mind she thought, "I will never leave either of you." The witness. As she left Emika's house, walking down the narrow path, she didn't notice the man standing near a small shop. He had been buying cigarettes when he looked up and saw her, and in that moment, everything shifted. It was Kunnel, Tade's close friend. His eyes widened as he watched her walk away from Emika's building. He knew exactly where she was coming from. He understood what it meant. Without wasting a second, he pulled out his phone. Tade needed to hear this. In that moment, the peaceful balance Isiosa thought she could maintain began to crumble. The secrets she had been so careful to hide were starting to spill into the open. Her life was stepping into a dangerous zone she hadn't even seen coming. ##### a dangerous sight. Kunnel stood by the small kiosk, cigarette in hand, frozen in shock as he watched Isiosa walk out of Emika's compound. He knew that street. He knew the people there. And he knew there was only one reason a young woman would be leaving that particular building at that hour. His friend, Tade, was about to get his heart shattered. Connell watched her blend into the evening crowd before he pulled out his phone. His hands trembled, not because he was scared of her, but because he dreaded the pain this truth would bring. He dialed Tade. "Tade, were you day?" Connell asked, urgency in his voice. "Omo, I'm just at home resting. I saw your missed call earlier. You day all right?" Connell hesitated, glancing in the direction she had gone, then took a deep breath. "Tade, I just see something." "See what?" Tade asked, still relaxed, completely unaware of the bomb about to drop. Connell exhaled slowly, gathering his thoughts. "I just saw SA now. She just comment from one guy house for 3rd Junction side. That small pink building behind the mechanic shop." Silence. A long, stretching silence. Then Tade laughed weakly, almost nervously. "Connell, stop that thing. SA no fit day there." Connell's voice turned serious. "Tade, I know your girl when I see her. That's definitely her. She was wearing a blue top and black jeans. I even called her name, and she looked back at me." Tade's breath hitched in his throat. "You're sure?" "I'm really sure, man." Another heavy silence hung in the air. Connell added, "I don't know what she's doing at that guy's place, but there's another dude in that room. It's not a spot for casual visits, just so you know." Tade felt his throat go dry. He whispered, "Thanks. I hear you." After ending the call, he sat on the edge of his bed, shaking. His stomach twisted painfully, and his mind raced in circles. But after a few minutes, he stood up, trying to shake it off. "No way. She wouldn't do that. SA can't do that to me." He shook his head, desperate to push the thought away. "People just want to mess up what we have." He tried to convince himself Connell was wrong, that he was overthinking it, that love was stronger than rumors. But deep down, a small crack had formed in his trust, a crack that would only grow wider with time. Isiosa returns home. That night, when Isiosa got home, she was absolutely glowing. Seriously, it was like she had a light bulb shining from within. Her steps felt so light, almost like she was floating, and her face radiated relaxation, like all her worries just melted away. As she walked in, her mom caught a glimpse of her and smiled knowingly, like she could see the happiness spilling out of her. "Your friend must have really missed you. Look at how happy you are," her mom said, and Isiosa had to fight the urge to flinch. "Yes, Ma," she replied, trying to keep it cool, even though her heart was racing. Once inside her room, she flopped onto her bed, letting out a deep sigh of contentment. The day replayed in her mind like a favorite movie, the gentle comfort of Tade's presence and the wild intensity of Emika's charm. Her heart danced with joy. Her body tingled with excitement. Her mind felt so satisfied, like she had just savored the best dessert ever. She felt unstoppable, like she could take on the world. 2 men, 1 heart. 2 lives, 1 girl. Everything felt under control. Or so she thought. The warning. The next day, Tade called her. His voice was different, not angry, not accusing, just strange. There was a hint of something in the air, and it made her stomach twist a little. "SA? Where were you yesterday evening?" he asked casually, but she could sense the weight behind his words. Her heart skipped a beat, but she recovered quickly, pulling her thoughts together. "With Ivy," she lied smoothly, like it was the easiest thing in the world. "Didn't I tell you?" "Yes, you did," he replied, his quiet tone unnerving her for a moment. But she brushed it off, pushing the uneasy feeling aside. "Why? Is everything okay?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah," Tade said, forcing a smile through the phone that she could almost hear. "Everything is fine." But deep down, she knew it wasn't. That night, Tade prayed before sleeping, something he rarely did. It wasn't that he was sure she was cheating, but he felt lost, not knowing what to believe anymore. The doubt was creeping in, and it gnawed at him like a persistent itch he couldn't scratch. Justifying herself. Meanwhile, Isiosa was blissfully unaware of the crack forming in her relationship. She was wrapped up in her own little world, convincing herself she deserved love from both men because each fulfilled different needs. "Tade is my future," she thought while applying lip gloss, admiring her reflection in the mirror, feeling like a queen. "But Emika is my happiness," she added, a smile creeping onto her face at the thought of his laughter. She never considered loyalty. She never feared consequences. She never imagined a world where the truth could come out. In her mind, she was skilled enough to balance everything, like a tightrope walker in a circus. Life hadn't yet shown her that secrets are like smoke. You can hide the fire for a while, but the smoke always finds a way out. A brewing storm. In the days that followed, Connell watched her quietly. He didn't confront her. He wasn't foolish. Instead, he noticed the pattern. Her sudden excuses. Her late replies. Her disappearing acts. Every sign pointed to trouble. And even though Tade tried to ignore it, the seed of doubt had been planted in his heart. He loved her deeply. He trusted her blindly. And that made the wound even deeper. Isiosa continued living her double life, blissfully unaware that one careless moment had already started a chain reaction that would destroy everything she thought she controlled. The storm was growing. Quietly, patiently, inevitably. And soon, it would break. The mist period. The first sign came quietly, almost like a whisper. One morning, as Isiosa stood in front of her mirror adjusting her hair, she felt a heaviness in her lower belly. Dull, lingering, unfamiliar. At first, she brushed it off, thinking, no big deal, my monthly cycle is just around the corner. But 2 days passed, then 5, then 7. Still nothing. She tried to stay calm, telling herself that stress could delay things. Travel could delay things. Even the weather could mess with her cycle. That's what she kept repeating in her head. But deep down, a cold fear wrapped itself around her heart, squeezing tighter with each passing day. Because she knew her cycle was never late, not even by a day. Strange symptoms. Days turned into weeks, and her body started sending her signals she couldn't ignore. Her appetite changed. She craved weird combinations of food that made no sense. Mornings came with nausea, and she felt like she was on a roller coaster that wouldn't stop. Smells she once loved suddenly made her feel sick, like she was trapped in a bad dream. One afternoon, while her mom cooked stew in the kitchen, Isiosa dashed to the bathroom and vomited so violently her hands trembled. Her mom knocked on the door, concern lacing her voice. "Essay, are you okay?" I'm fine," she lied, rinsing her mouth quickly, but she wasn't fine. Not at all. Her mind started doing dangerous calculations. Dates, times, memories. The days she had been with Tade. The same days she had been with Emeka. Her hands shook. Her breath quickened. No, 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 she whispered to herself, panic rising. It can't be that. As the reality began to sink in, she felt the weight of her choices pressing down on her, and the storm she had been ignoring was finally ready to unleash its fury. 3 days later, Essay found herself in a little pharmacy tucked away in a corner of town, far from home, somewhere no one would recognize her. It felt surreal, like she was in a movie. She grabbed a pregnancy test kit, her heart racing, and tucked it away in her bag as if it were some kind of secret treasure. Rushing home, she hoped her mom wouldn't ask any questions, but the tension in her chest was heavy. That night, while her parents were off at evening fellowship, Essay finally had the chance to take the test. It was now or never, right? Her palms were sweaty, and her legs felt like jelly. Locking herself in the bathroom, she could hardly breathe. She tore open the packet with shaky fingers, following the instructions like they were a lifeline. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 3. When she finally mustered the courage to look, her world came crashing down around her. 2 bold red lines stared back at her. Positive. No, no, no. This can't be happening, she whispered, covering her mouth as tears welled up in her eyes. God, please not me. She sank to the floor, her back against the cold tiles. Her mind went blank, then raced, then blank again. 1,000 thoughts collided, none making sense. Pregnant, pregnant, pregnant. And the worst part? Whose child? Her heart raced as she stumbled back to her bedroom, locking the door behind her. She sat on her bed, shaking with panic, replaying the last few months in her mind. Her visits to Tade, her visits to Emeka. The timing overlapped. The dates matched for both guys, and it felt like a cruel twist of fate. A cold wave washed over her. She wasn't just pregnant, she was pregnant and confused. What would her parents say? What would her mom's church friends think? What would Tade say? What would Emeka say? What on earth would she do? She pressed her hands to her face, tears streaming uncontrollably. Each drop felt like a weight, pulling her deeper into despair. By the next morning, she had made up her mind. She would tell Tade. He was the stable one, the responsible one, the guy who could take care of her, the one her parents would approve of, the guy whose future was already mapped out, or so she thought. She convinced herself it made sense. He will handle it, she whispered to herself, trying to drown out the panic. He will support me. Telling Emeka didn't even cross her mind. She knew he was struggling with his own demons. What could he possibly do with a baby? The thought felt like a weight on her chest, making it harder to breathe. But picking Tade didn't erase one thing: her conscience. Every time she thought about Emeka, guilt stabbed at her heart like a dagger. Every memory of their time together brought a wave of shame crashing over her. But she forced herself not to dwell on it. She had to protect her future. She had to survive this. She had to choose wisely. And Tade was the only choice. When she visited him later that week, her heart raced as she stepped into his house. He greeted her with a warm smile, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside her. "What's up?" he asked, noticing her shaky hands. "You look tense." She took a deep breath, feeling like she was about to jump off a cliff. "Tade, I'm pregnant." His expression froze, shock first, then joy lit up his face like a light bulb. "Pregnant?" he whispered, stepping closer. "You're serious?" "Yes," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. He pulled her into a tight embrace, laughing softly into her hair. "Say, you don't know how happy you've made me." In that moment, she closed her eyes, but guilt pierced her heart again. He was happy. He trusted her. He believed completely. He didn't know the truth. He didn't know the doubts. He didn't know the danger behind her silence. A week later, he proposed, on one knee, with a ring he had saved up for, with his heart wide open. And Isiosa said yes, smiling, pretending, hiding a truth that could shatter him completely. From that day on, she kept the secret to herself. She never told Emeka. She never told her parents. She never told anyone. But secrets don't just vanish. They grow. They expand. They follow you everywhere. And Isiosa's secret was growing inside her, literally. Every kick, every swell, every sleepless night reminded her that consequences were on the way, whether she was ready or not. It felt like a ticking clock, each second echoing the reality of her choices. She found herself daydreaming about what could have been, what might have happened if things had gone differently. But the reality was there, right in front of her, and she had to face it. As the days turned into weeks, the weight of her secret felt heavier. She wondered if she would ever find the courage to share her truth, or if she would carry it alone forever. Each day brought new challenges, and she felt like she was walking a tightrope, balancing between two worlds, one where everything seemed perfect, and the other where her heart was in turmoil. The question lingered in her mind. Could she really keep this up? Could she keep pretending? Or would the truth eventually find a way to break free? The day Tade proposed was one Isiosa would never forget, not because it was the happiest day of her life, but because it felt like the heaviest. You know how some moments can feel both magical and overwhelming at the same time? That was exactly it for her. He took her to this cozy garden restaurant, all decked out with soft lights twinkling like stars and blooming flowers that smelled absolutely divine. It was the kind of place that made you feel all warm and fuzzy inside. She thought they were just going for dinner, maybe to celebrate something small, and she never imagined a ring was tucked away in his pocket, wrapped in a little velvet box. Sitting across from him, her heart raced, not from excitement, but from guilt. Lately, she'd been feeling more nauseous than usual, and her clothes were starting to fit differently. It was getting harder to hide the pregnancy, and she felt like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. But Tate had no clue. He spent the whole evening stealing glances at her, smiling like he'd found his whole world in one person. His joy was contagious, and it made her heart ache even more. She wanted to share her happiness with him, but the truth felt like a brick wall between them. When the food arrived, he barely touched his plate. His fingers tapped nervously against the table, and Isiosa could sense something big was coming, but she had no idea what it was. Was he nervous about asking her something? Was it about the baby? Then he cleared his throat and stood up. Before she could ask what he was doing, he dropped to one knee. Just like that, the world around her faded away. S.A. froze. Her breath caught in her chest, and it felt like time stood still. People around them paused, watching with bated breath. Tade opened the small box and looked up at her with eyes full of sincerity and love that made her feel both cherished and undeserving. "Isiosa," he said, his voice steady yet emotional. "When you told me you were pregnant, I knew God had blessed me. You've given me the greatest gift of my life. I want to build a future with you. I want to take care of you and protect you and our child." Tears filled her eyes, not from joy but from shame. She felt like she was standing on a tightrope, balancing between two worlds, and one misstep could send her crashing down. He continued, "I love you more than I can explain. So please, will you marry me?" A hush fell across the restaurant. Everyone waited, their eyes darting between them. Her heartbeat became a drum in her ears, loud and relentless. She was at a crossroads, between truth and survival, honesty and comfort. But she remembered her earlier decision, the one she made the day she saw the two red lines. She chose security. She chose Tate. "Yes," she whispered, the word escaping her lips like a sigh of relief mixed with despair. Tate exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. He slipped the ring onto her trembling finger and hugged her tightly as applause erupted around them. It felt like a fairy tale moment, but inside, Isiosa felt a deep coldness spreading through her chest. She had said yes, but she wasn't free. She was trapped in the consequences of her own choices, and the weight of that reality pressed down on her like a heavy fog. From that day on, Tate became even more devoted. He started acting like a husband already, caring, attentive, protective. It was sweet, really. He bought baby items, tiny socks, soft blankets, feeding bottles, all the things that made it feel so real. He downloaded pregnancy apps and excitedly shared weekly updates with her. "Look at this. By now, the baby's heartbeat is strong." He began saving aggressively, talking about renting a bigger apartment, buying a car that would be better for carrying a child, and even setting up a small business for her after she delivered. He was dreaming for two and planning for three. Meanwhile, SA felt her life shifting rapidly, faster than she could process. She should have been happy, but she wasn't, because every time she held the engagement ring, images of Emeka flashed in her mind. His small room, his rough laughter, his warm eyes, his tight hugs, his voice calling her my girl. She pushed those memories away. She told herself she had to stop thinking about him. She convinced herself the baby was probably Tade's anyway. He was the responsible one, the man who could give her child stability. But guilt is stubborn. It doesn't leave just because you're pretending. It lingers, gnawing at your conscience like a relentless itch. Even after the engagement, SA did something risky. She kept visiting Emeka. At first, she told herself she was just going to say hi, just to check on him, just to keep the connection she couldn't fully let go of. But feelings aren't switches you can turn off. He didn't know she was engaged. He didn't know she was pregnant. He only knew she had traveled for Christmas and come back acting a little different. When she walked into his room after the engagement, Emeka's face lit up instantly. My Madame Dawn show," he joked, pulling her into a hug. She hugged him back, her heart twisting painfully. They talked. They laughed. They spent time together. And though she tried to stop herself, the bond between them refused to break. It was like a rubber band stretched too far. It wouldn't snap, but it was definitely strained. She knew it was wrong. She knew she was playing with fire. She knew she was dragging him deeper into a story he didn't understand. Yet she stayed, silently breaking two hearts at once. As the weeks went by, SA's belly slowly began to round out. She wore big shirts and loose dresses when visiting Emeka, pretending it was just fashion. But she knew time was running out. Soon, her body would betray her. Soon, she wouldn't be able to hide anything. Soon, the world she built on lies would collapse. Eventually, she stopped visiting Emeka, only because her belly grew too big to hide. He called her repeatedly, asking why she didn't come anymore. She lied again. "I'm busy. I'm helping my mother with something. I'm tired. I'm not feeling fine." He sensed something was off, but he didn't know what. And she wasn't brave enough to tell him. Not yet. The weight of her choices pressed heavily on her heart, and every lie felt like a chain wrapping tighter around her soul. She was stuck in a web of her own making, and the only way out seemed to be facing the truth. But how could she do that when the truth felt like it would shatter everything? As she sat in silence, contemplating her next move, she realized that the only way to find peace was to confront her reality. The path ahead was uncertain, but she knew one thing for sure. She had to be honest with herself and everyone involved. No more hiding. No more pretending. It was time to face the music, no matter how painful it might be. And so, she took a deep breath, ready to unravel the tangled threads of her life. Because sometimes, the hardest choices lead to the most profound transformations. It was time to reclaim her story. Tate was completely head over heels for Isiosa. Seriously, he was smitten. You could see it in the way he showed up at her place, arms loaded with fruits, vitamins, cute clothes, and delicious food. anything and everything to make her feel cozy and at home. Her mom adored him, and even her dad, who usually kept to himself, would give Tate a nod of approval. Everyone around them thought she had found a gem of a guy, but only Isiosa knew the heavy truth she carried. Only she felt the weight of her secret pressing down on her, especially during those sleepless nights when she'd wake up, shaking and wondering whose child was growing inside her. It was a wild mix of emotions: love, fear, confusion. Her world was teetering on a pile of lies, and we all know lies don't stick around forever, right? The truth was creeping closer, inch by inch, like a shadow lurking just out of sight. And when it finally showed up, it would shatter everything. As Isiosa's pregnancy hit those final weeks, the worry inside her felt like a boulder in her chest. Her body was changing in ways she never expected, movements slowed down, and that secret weighed heavier than ever. But she kept smiling, pretending everything was just fine, like she was living in a fairy tale. Tade was over the moon, treating her like a queen. He woke up early every morning to whip up breakfast, attended every single checkup, and never let her lift a finger. He envisioned the baby's arrival as the highlight of their love story, the moment they'd both been waiting for. He even picked out names, decorated the nursery with cute little animals, and bought matching outfits. It was all so blissful, yet he was blissfully unaware that reality had twisted into something he never saw coming. Then came the day when labor kicked off quietly on a humid morning. Isiosa woke up to a sharp, strange pain in her lower abdomen. At first, she brushed it off, thinking it was just a normal cramp. But as the contractions ramped up, they grew stronger and more relentless, like a storm brewing inside her. Her mom, who had been sleeping nearby, rushed to her side, panic flashing in her eyes. "Essay, sit down. We're going to the hospital. Like, right now," she shouted, urgency dripping from her voice. You could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy. Tade, who was at work, got the call and showed up almost instantly, anxiety written all over his handsome face. Isiosa felt a flicker of guilt seeing his worried eyes, the way he held her hand as if she were fragile glass. He didn't know the whole story. He thought she was carrying only his child. Hours slipped by in a blur of sweat and tears in the hospital room. Nurses and doctors moved swiftly, their calm voices cutting through the chaos. Isiosa clutched her mom's hand while Tade stood close, whispering words of encouragement. It was a whirlwind of emotions, the excitement mixed with fear, the unknown looming just around the corner. And then, two cries pierced the air. Twins, two beautiful baby boys. The room filled with the soft, rhythmic sound of new life beginning. It was a miracle, a moment that felt surreal. But something made Tade pause. Something small yet unmistakable. One baby was fair-skinned, almost looking like him. The other was dark-skinned, darker than both of them. A quiet tension filled the room, unnoticed by Isiosa, who was too exhausted and elated to care. She reached for both babies, tears streaming down her face. "They're perfect," she whispered, her heart swelling with love. Tade smiled faintly, but a seed of doubt took root in his heart, buried under relief and joy. For now, he brushed it aside, convincing himself it was just a trick of genetics. He hugged Isiosa and kissed her forehead, holding his children close, not realizing the storm brewing beneath the surface. The first week felt like a surreal dream. Nurses came and went, doctors checked vitals, and the hospital room became a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and pure exhaustion. Tade was the perfect dad in public, doting, proud, and present. He kept telling everyone, "They're mine. I'll raise them with all my heart." But that doubt lingered like a shadow, refusing to fade away. He couldn't shake the difference in skin tone, the faint resemblance of one twin to someone he couldn't quite place. Isiosa, on the other hand, felt a mix of relief and panic. She held both babies, whispering prayers that Tade would never discover the truth. She told herself she'd figure it out, that she could twist reality enough to keep this delicate balance. But fate rarely gives you that luxury, does it? Tade's friends started to notice his distracted glances at the babies. Even his dad quietly questioned, "Son, are you sure both belong to you?" Tade laughed it off, trying to brush it aside. He couldn't let anyone think poorly of Isiosa. She had given him joy, a child, and he was determined to believe in the miracle, even if his heart whispered otherwise. Yet, doubt gnawed at him. Each time he looked at the darker twin, he felt a strange pang, a suspicion that refused to leave, whispering that something in his carefully constructed world was off. Isiosa tried to avoid those glances. She smiled whenever he looked at the babies, cradling both as if to shield the truth from his eyes. But 1 week after the birth, that fragile shield was about to break. The house was quiet that evening, the soft hum of the fan mingling with the rhythmic breathing of the twins in their bassinets. Isiosa sat on the couch, carefully cradling both boys, smiling softly at Tade as he fussed over feeding bottles in the kitchen. Everything looked perfect. Everything seemed normal. But Tade's mind refused to be at ease. Ever since the twins were born, he couldn't shake the differences. He'd been a doting father from day one, yet a small, nagging voice inside him whispered relentlessly. The fair-skinned twin, he was undeniably his. The same almond-shaped eyes, the same soft nose, the same tiny hands. But the darker one, he didn't share any resemblance. His skin was darker, his features subtly different. He looked like someone else entirely, and that realization haunted Tade. He tried to push it aside, telling himself, "It's nothing. Genetics can be strange. Twins are unpredictable." Yet, the more he looked at the darker twin, the more doubt grew. And the more Isiosa smiled while cradling him, the more his heart ached with suspicion. Cunnel, his close friend, had been watching Isiosa from the sidelines long before the twins arrived. He remembered the day he saw her leaving Emika's house, and that memory resurfaced during a visit to Tade. "You sure everything's all right with the twins?" Cunnel asked casually one afternoon, sipping his drink. Tade frowned. "Why wouldn't it be?" Cunnel shrugged, trying not to alarm him. "Just, differences. Sometimes babies don't always look alike. I just thought I'd ask." Tade forced a laugh, but inside, a cold knot tightened in his stomach. Cunnel's innocent words had planted another tiny seed of suspicion. That night, Tade stayed awake long after Isiosa had gone to bed. He watched the twins sleep, gripping the edge of the crib as if holding onto his sanity. He whispered to himself, "One day, I'll know. I just need to be sure." He loved Isiosa fiercely. He had been dreaming of this family for months, planning for it, imagining it. But the doubt had begun to grow like a dark vine, creeping into every thought, every glance, every moment he shared with her. And even though he wanted to trust her, even though he believed in her, that small seed of doubt refused to die. Days turned into weeks, and the tension simmered just below the surface. Tade found himself scrutinizing every little detail about the twins, every smile, every coo, every tiny movement. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. One evening, as they sat on the couch, Isiosa cradling the twins, Tade's heart raced. He glanced at the darker twin, who was babbling away, completely oblivious to the storm brewing in his father's mind. "Do you think they'll look more like us as they grow?" Tade asked, trying to sound casual. Isiosa smiled, her eyes sparkling. "Of course. They're just little now. They'll grow into their features." But Tade couldn't shake the unease. "Yeah, but genetics can be tricky." Isiosa's smile faltered for a moment, and Tade caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Was it fear? Guilt? He couldn't tell, but it sent a shiver down his spine. The days dragged on, and Tade's mind became a battleground of love and doubt. He wanted to believe in the family they were building, but the whispers of suspicion echoed louder each day. Then came the moment that changed everything. Tade was scrolling through his phone one afternoon when he stumbled upon a picture of a family gathering. It was a casual shot of his relatives, and in the background, he spotted a familiar face, Emika. His heart raced. He remembered Isiosa's past with him, the whispers of a relationship that had ended before Tade came. Isiosa felt the shift in the air, and it was almost palpable, like a storm brewing on the horizon. She noticed how Tade's gaze lingered on the darker twin, a tension coiling tightly in his shoulders, and how that smile of his didn't quite reach his eyes. Each glance sent her heart racing, a frantic drumbeat echoing in her chest. She knew that the day he'd question her was looming closer, and it made her stomach churn with anxiety. She tried to brace herself, rehearsing apologies she wasn't ready to voice, all while a tempest brewed quietly inside her. Her secret, held tightly for months, now felt like a heavy weight on her chest. She had thought she could juggle it all. 2 men, 2 lives, 1 heart. She believed she could control the narrative, weaving a tapestry of love and deceit that would hold together. But Tade's love, his unwavering devotion, and those growing suspicions were pushing her closer to the edge. Deep down, she knew the truth couldn't stay hidden forever, and that thought terrified her. The house was eerily quiet, almost too quiet. The twins were asleep, their little bodies rising and falling in peaceful slumber, and Tade was tucking them in with such care, humming soft lullabies that danced in the air like whispers of comfort. Isiosa forced a smile, trying to match his calm vibe, but inside, she felt like she was walking a tightrope. One wrong word, one slip of emotion, and the fragile balance she had worked so hard to maintain could shatter into a million pieces. Doubt was creeping into Tade's heart like a shadow, inching closer and closer. No matter how carefully she tiptoed around it, Isiosa knew it was only a matter of time before the world she built on lies came crashing down. The morning felt unusually still, almost like the calm before a storm. Isiosa sat on the couch, cradling the fair-skinned twin in her arms while the darker one slept peacefully in the crib beside her. She could feel that storm brewing, the tension thick in the air. Tade had been distant lately, avoiding her gaze, fidgeting with his hands as if they were shouting his unspoken thoughts. Her heart raced, pounding in her chest like a drum. She had always known this day would come, the moment when her well-kept secret might unravel. But she never thought it would happen so soon. Tade had spent the night tossing and turning, his mind a whirlwind of doubts that had quietly gnawed at him since the twins' birth. Those doubts had morphed into an obsession, gnawing at him until sleep eluded him, food lost its appeal, and the gentle love he once felt for Isiosa became tangled with fear and suspicion. After hours of silent torment, he made a decision he dreaded but felt he had to make. He would confirm his doubts with a DNA test. He called the clinic he had quietly researched the day before and booked a private appointment for the twins. He didn't tell Isiosa. He wanted to be absolutely sure before confronting her. The test would reveal everything, and deep down, he was terrified of what that truth might be. Isiosa's heart raced as she sensed the reckoning approaching. The next morning, Tade gently took the twins to the clinic, holding each one tenderly while nurses collected the necessary samples. Isiosa stayed home, pretending to rest, blissfully unaware that the final confirmation of her secret was already in motion. Hours later, Tade returned, clutching the results, his hands trembling slightly as he sat silently on the edge of the couch. Isiosa, sensing something was off, looked at him anxiously, her heart pounding louder than ever. "What's wrong?" she asked softly, trying to mask the panic rising in her chest, but it was a losing battle. Tade's face was pale, his voice low and shaky as he finally spoke. "Essay, I have the results." Her stomach dropped, and she fought to stay composed, her mind racing with possibilities. He handed her the envelope, but before she could touch it, he said, "One of them is mine. The other is not." Time froze. Isiosa's mind went blank, her mouth opening in disbelief, but no sound came out. She had braced herself for anger, maybe disappointment, but the sheer finality of Tade's words hit her like a thunderbolt, shaking her to her core. "No, no, that can't be," she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief and fear. "I'm sorry, Essay," Tade said, his voice breaking slightly, the pain evident in his eyes. "I wanted to trust you. I wanted to believe everything would be fine. But now, the truth is here. I can't ignore it." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face, blurring her vision. "It's not true. I didn't." Tade cut her off, his tone now firm and resolute, a wall of determination rising between them. "The test doesn't lie. One of our children is not mine. I can't live in a house built on lies. You need to leave. I will take care of my child. But you need to go." Her knees buckled, and she fell to the floor, grabbing his hand desperately, pleading with every fiber of her being. "Tade, please. I can explain. I didn't mean for this to happen. I love you. I love you both. I didn't know how to tell you." But Tade's expression was unmoving, a mix of sorrow and determination that crushed her spirit. "I gave you my heart," he said softly, almost breaking, "and you betrayed it. I will love my child. I will provide for both of them if I have to. But you go and tell the other man." Isiosa left that day, her heart shattered into a million pieces, the twins' cries echoing in her mind like a haunting melody. She rented a small apartment with the child support Tade would provide, feeling like a ghost of her former self. Alone, she held both children close, realizing for the first time the full weight of her actions. She had wanted love, passion, and security. And now, she had nothing but the bitter taste of regret. As she rocked the twins to sleep, she whispered to herself, "Cheating doesn't pay, it never pays." The path ahead would be tough, and she would raise the twins on her own, hiding from the consequences of her choices. But deep down, she understood the truth she had ignored for too long. Every action has a cost. Every secret has a price. And some lies, no matter how carefully kept, will always come to light. The first few weeks in her tiny apartment were the hardest Isiosa had ever faced. The walls were bare, the rooms cramped, and the city outside buzzed with life, reminding her that the world had moved on while she was stuck in her own mess. Yet, she had the twins, one fair-skinned, one dark-skinned, both completely dependent on her. Holding them, she felt a mix of love and fear. Love, because they were her children. Fear, because they were constant reminders of every mistake she had made. Every day felt like a battle. The mornings were filled with the chaos of diaper changes and feedings. The afternoons blurred into naps and tears, and the evenings brought a solitude that weighed heavily on her heart. She would sit in the dim light of the living room, rocking the twins in her arms, feeling the weight of her decisions pressing down on her. There were moments of joy, of laughter, of love, but they were often overshadowed by the haunting memories of Tade's face, the disappointment etched into his features. As the weeks turned into months, Isiosa found herself navigating the complexities of single motherhood. She learned to adapt, to find joy in the little things, a smile from one of the twins, a moment of peace when they both slept. But the shadows of her past loomed large, and the guilt gnawed at her like a relentless tide. She often wondered if Tade was moving on, if he had found solace in the arms of someone else, and the thought twisted her heart in knots. She took on odd jobs, anything to make ends meet, all while juggling the demands of her children. Each day was a reminder of her choices, of the love she had thrown away. The twins grew, their personalities blossoming, and with each milestone, Isiosa felt a mix of pride and sorrow. She would smile through the pain, but inside, she was still that girl holding on to a secret that had cost her everything. One evening, as she sat on the couch with the twins nestled against her, she found herself reflecting on the choices that had led her here. She remembered the thrill of the forbidden, the rush of living on the edge, but that thrill had come at a price. The laughter that once filled her life was now replaced by the quiet sounds of her children breathing softly as they slept. She felt the weight of their future resting on her shoulders, and it was both a blessing and a burden. As the sun set, casting a warm glow across the room, Isiosa made a promise to herself and to her children. She would do better. She would be better. No more secrets, no more lies. She would raise them with honesty and love, showing them the value of trust and integrity. It wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to break the cycle of deceit that had ensnared her life. The road ahead was uncertain, but as she cradled her twins, she felt a flicker of hope. She knew that healing would take time, but every day felt like a nonstop whirlwind. Seriously, it was like being on a roller coaster that never stopped. You know the routine: feeding the twins, changing diapers, giving them baths, rocking them to sleep, and then doing it all over again. It was a crazy cycle. Sometimes, I'd whip up simple meals, even skipping my own food just to make sure the little ones were fed. Can you believe that? It's wild how easy it is to lose track of yourself when you're focused on taking care of others, right? The child support money from Tade went straight to rent, essentials, and maybe a little treat for myself here and there. But it hit me hard how small my world had become. Gone were the nights out, the thrill of hanging with Emeka or Tade, and that sweet sense of freedom I once cherished. Now, my life revolved around this tiny apartment and two little lives I had to protect at all costs. It was a bittersweet reality. Sure, there were moments of pure joy, like when the twins giggled at each other, but it was also overwhelming. But even in the midst of all this exhaustion, something clicked for me. I realized my choices had real consequences, and there was no escaping that. The thrill of deception had vanished, replaced by the weight of responsibility, worry, and constant vigilance. It was a heavy load to carry, but somehow, I was doing it. One evening, I looked at the twins, both sound asleep in their cribs. It was such a peaceful sight. One of them stirred, the darker one reaching out a tiny hand toward me. My heart melted a little at that moment. I knelt beside him, my heart heavy with all the thoughts swirling in my head. "You're mine," I whispered softly. "All of you. Even if I made mistakes, even if I hurt the people I loved. I promise I'll take care of you." Tears streamed down my cheeks as I spoke. It was a tough realization. The choices I made for love, pleasure, and security had led me here. And now, I was the only one carrying that burden. No Tate, no Emeka, just me, and the two tiny lives that depended on me. It was both empowering and terrifying. I felt like I was on a tightrope, balancing between my past and the future I wanted for my kids. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, I found my groove. I learned to manage my time, organize my little apartment, and care for both kids without losing myself. It was like a dance, really. I discovered a strength I didn't know I had, a resilience born from necessity. It was kind of amazing to think about how far I had come. I also knew I had to be careful. There was no way I could risk anyone discovering the full truth. Tate kept sending money regularly, but I maintained a careful distance. Emeka faded into the background, though memories of him sometimes haunted me, reminding me of the choices I had made. Watching the twins play together, giggling in their adorable little ways, I whispered to myself, "This is what I get for trying to have it all, for loving without limits." Cheating doesn't pay. And yet, life goes on, even when you mess up. It was a hard lesson, but one I was learning every day. Raising the twins alone wasn't just about survival. It was about redemption. I couldn't change the past, but I could shape their future. I could give them love, stability, and care, even if it meant sacrificing my own comfort. It was a trade-off I was willing to make. In that small apartment, filled with soft cries, gentle laughter, and tiny hands gripping mine, I finally understood what responsibility meant. I had played with fire and got burned, but now, I was learning to rise from the ashes. My life would never be the same. My choices had consequences, but I also understood that even after mistakes, there could still be hope, still be love, still be a chance to do better. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to breathe fully. The road ahead would be tough, but I was determined to walk it, step by step, with the two little lives that depended on me. Months passed since I moved into my cozy apartment with the twins. Life had settled into a challenging, exhausting rhythm, but I had adapted. I fed them, bathed them, and watched them grow. Each day brought new challenges, but also a quiet sense of accomplishment. There was something beautiful about watching them learn to crawl, giggle, and explore the world around them. Yet, the past never stays buried. It's like that annoying song that gets stuck in your head, right? No matter how hard you try to ignore it, it just keeps playing. It was a humid afternoon when I heard a knock at my door. I was in the kitchen, stirring a small pot of stew, when the sound echoed through the tiny apartment. Who could that be? I muttered to myself, wiping my hands nervously. When I opened the door, I froze. There stood Emeka. The air felt heavy with unspoken words. His eyes widened slightly as he took in the scene. The two babies, the modest apartment, and the exhausted but determined look on my face. He began, his voice faltering. I stepped back, closing the door slightly. What are you doing here?" My heart raced. This was the moment I had dreaded. I heard," he stammered. "I heard some things. About the babies." My heart sank. I had done everything to keep this part of my life hidden from him. Yet now, here he was, seeing the evidence, the tangible proof of my secrets. Emeka stepped closer, his hands slightly raised as if trying to calm the storm brewing inside me. "I didn't mean to come like this," he said softly. "But I need to know the truth." My mind raced. I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, but now that it was here, I felt paralyzed. "Emeka, it's complicated," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Complicated?" he repeated, pain flashing in his eyes. I thought what we had meant something." I swallowed hard, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. "It did. It does. But Tade, he's the one who can provide for them. I couldn't." "You couldn't what?" he asked sharply. "Couldn't tell me? Couldn't trust me?" I faltered. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I thought I was doing the right thing. Emeka's expression darkened. His voice grew quiet but intense. "You were doing the right thing for who? Yourself?" I lowered my gaze, unable to meet his eyes. I felt cornered, exposed, and utterly guilty. Yes, I admitted softly. I was thinking about survival, about the babies. I didn't want them to go without. I, I made mistakes, Emeka. I know that. I can't take them back. Emeka stood in silence, anger and disappointment warring with lingering affection. He looked at the twins, who were now gurgling and reaching for me, and his heart ached. You had a choice, he said finally, his voice heavy. And you chose this. And I'm not the one raising them. You didn't trust me. You didn't even tell me. Tears streamed down my face as I shook my head. I didn't know how. I thought. I thought it would be easier if I handled it myself. I didn't want to ruin everything. For a moment, the room was silent except for the soft coos of the twins. Then, slowly, Emeka shook his head. I can't be part of this, he said finally, his voice breaking. I can't be part of a life built on lies. But I still care about you. I still care about them. My chest tightened. I knew he was speaking the truth. He was devastated, just like Tate had been, but he still loved the children in some way. I nodded slowly, unable to speak. I'll take responsibility for my part. I whispered. I'll raise them. I'll make sure they're cared for. But I can't ask for your forgiveness. Not now. Not ever. Emeka sighed, backing away slightly. I hope you find a way to live with yourself, essay. But you have to know, the past doesn't stay quiet forever. It will always find you. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the doorway, feeling the weight of my choices crashing down on me. It was a harsh reality, but one I had to face. The past was a shadow that wouldn't let me go, and now it was creeping back into my life, reminding me of everything I had tried to leave behind. But deep down, I knew I had to keep moving forward. For the twins. For myself. Even if it meant facing the ghosts of my past. As the days went by, I found myself replaying that encounter over and over. Emeka's disappointment echoed in my mind, and it stung more than I expected. I had built walls around my heart, convinced that I could handle everything alone, but the truth was, I was scared. Scared of judgment, scared of failure, and most of all, scared of being alone in this journey. I started reflecting on the choices A heavy silence. He left without saying another word, leaving her standing in the doorway, the soft cries of the twins echoing in the empty apartment. It felt like the air had thickened, wrapping around her like a heavy blanket. Isiosa sank to the floor, holding both babies close, their tiny bodies warm against her chest. No matter how hard she tried to hide the truth, secrets have a way of surfacing, right? They always do. Sure, she had survived. She had adapted, but the fallout from her choices always seemed to catch up with her, whether she was ready for it or not. It was like a shadow lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to pounce. For the first time in months, she really understood that life wasn't going to let her forget. Hard lessons. The apartment felt quieter than usual, almost too quiet. The twins were sleeping peacefully, their tiny chests rising and falling in a perfect rhythm, and for a moment, she found solace in that. Isiosa sat in the worn armchair, cradling a bottle of milk, staring at the wall, lost in thought. Memories flashed through her mind like a movie reel, moments of joy mixed with heartbreak. These past months had been the toughest of her life. She had survived the chaos of her decisions, dealt with the heartbreak of Tade's rejection, and faced Emeka's disappointment head-on. Every day felt like a struggle, and every choice weighed heavily on her. Yet, here she was, still holding the two little lives that depended on her completely. It was a bittersweet reminder of her reality. Confronting reality. Isiosa had once thought she could have it all: love, excitement, security, and freedom. She chased after pleasure without thinking about the consequences, believing she was clever enough to juggle two worlds. But reality had forced her to face the truth. There were no easy escapes, no shortcuts. Every lie came with a price, and hers had been steep. The love and trust of two men, her parents' potential disappointment, and the burden of raising two kids on her own. She whispered softly to herself, I thought I could play with fire and not get burned. I was wrong. So wrong. The weight of her choices pressed down on her, and she could feel the tears threatening to spill. Learning responsibility. In the weeks that followed, Isiosa started to build a more stable life, brick by brick. She learned to budget the child support money from Tade, carefully splitting it to cover rent, food, clothing, and baby supplies. It was a juggling act, and she often felt like she was teetering on the edge. She discovered the immense challenges of motherhood: sleepless nights, endless feedings, and the constant worry of whether she was doing enough. Each day was a new test, a chance to prove to herself that she could rise above the chaos. But with each small victory, like a successful grocery run or a peaceful nap time, she felt a flicker of hope. She was not just surviving. She was learning, growing, and slowly finding her way. But amidst the exhaustion, she found a strength she never knew she had. She became resourceful, patient, and resilient. Every decision she made, every sacrifice she endured, was for the twins. "You are my responsibility now," she whispered to them one night, holding them close. "And I will not fail you, not like I did before." A bitter understanding. She also began to grasp the deeper lessons from her choices. Love, she realized, couldn't be divided and kept hidden. Trust, once broken, could never be fully restored. And pleasure, no matter how enticing, was always fleeting. Each day reminded her of the consequences she had ignored: Tade's absence, Emika's anger, and the whispers of the past she could no longer control. But she also noticed the small victories: tiny smiles from her babies, the warmth of holding them safely, and the quiet pride in knowing that despite everything, she could care for them. Facing herself, one evening, after putting the twins to sleep, Isiosa looked into a cracked mirror. She didn't see the carefree, reckless girl she used to be. She saw a woman changed by experience, forced to confront the consequences of her actions. "I have to do better," she whispered, tracing the lines of her tired face. "For them. For myself. I can't change the past, but I can shape what comes next." It was a bitter lesson, learned through tears, heartbreak, and sleepless nights. But it was a lesson she would carry forever. The path forward. Isiosa started making plans for the future. She enrolled in a part-time course to improve her skills, hoping to provide more for the twins someday. She looked for stable work that would allow her to care for them while earning a living. She built routines, schedules, and a sense of order in a life that had once felt chaotic. It was hard. It was exhausting. It was lonely. But it was honest. And for the first time in a long while, Isiosa felt a quiet sense of purpose. She had made mistakes, big ones, but she was learning that life, no matter how harsh, demanded growth. She was determined to rise from the wreckage of her choices, even if it meant walking the hard road alone. She whispered softly to herself again, this time with a hint of resolve. Cheating doesn't pay, but hard work, responsibility, and love, they might just save you. Acceptance and hope. The small apartment was quiet again, but this time, it felt different. Not tense, not heavy, but alive in its own steady rhythm. Isiosa sat on the floor, cross-legged, with the twins playing beside her. One rolled over giggling, and the other reached for her hand, their tiny fingers curling around hers instinctively. Isiosa smiled, a slow, genuine smile that held both relief and sorrow. She had come a long way, embracing responsibility. She had learned that life offered no shortcuts, and boy, did it hit hard. Every choice carried weight, and hers had nearly broken her. But through it all, she had survived. Piece by piece, she had built a life from the fragments of her mistakes, like a mosaic of experiences that told her story. Watching the twins laugh together, a wave of pride washed over her. Their giggles filled the room, pure and innocent, blissfully unaware of the chaos that had brought them into the world. They were hers to love, protect, and guide, and in those moments, she felt a spark of hope. "Look at them," she thought. "They're my little miracles." Her heart whispered softly, "I may have stumbled, I may have lied, but I will not fail them. I will do better. I must do better." It was a promise she made not just to them, but to herself. She knew that every day was a chance to rewrite her story, to turn the page on the past, and embrace a future filled with possibility. Letting go of the past wasn't easy, though. The memories of Tade and Emika still lingered like shadows, creeping into her thoughts when she least expected it. She remembered the love they had shared, the moments that felt like magic, but also the betrayal that had shattered everything. The DNA test that had turned her world upside down was a stark reminder of how fragile trust could be. Tade's eyes, once filled with warmth, were now clouded with hurt, while Emika's disappointment cut deep, leaving scars that would take time to heal. She allowed herself to feel the weight of it all, the heartache and the regret, But she also knew she had to let it go. I can't change the past, she told herself. I can't undo the consequences of my actions. All she could do was move forward, one day at a time, with honesty and integrity as her guide. It was a hard lesson, but she was learning that acceptance was the first step toward healing. As the weeks turned into months, Isiosa found a rhythm in her life. She balanced work, classes, and caring for the twins, often feeling like a tightrope walker trying to maintain her balance. But amidst the chaos, she discovered a strength in herself that she hadn't known existed, a resilience born of necessity, love, and survival. It was like she had tapped into a well of inner strength that she could draw from whenever she felt overwhelmed. In this new life, she felt a fragile peace. It wasn't perfect. There were still sleepless nights and moments of doubt, but it was real. She had learned to cherish the small victories, the twins' first steps, their laughter echoing through the apartment, and the moments when they cuddled up close, their tiny hands grasping hers. Those were the moments that reminded her why she fought so hard to create a better life. One night, as she tucked the twins into bed, she whispered to herself, "You are my world now. Your smiles, your laughter, your little hands, this is what matters. I will not let the mistakes of my past define our future." It was a vow she repeated often, a mantra that grounded her when self-doubt threatened to creep in. Looking out the small window of her apartment, Isiosa saw the city stretching beyond, alive and relentless, much like her own life had been. But now, she faced it with a clearer mind and a stronger heart. She had learned to embrace the challenges, to see them as opportunities for growth. "I will keep working, learning, and growing," she promised herself. "I will raise my children with love, teaching them honesty, compassion, and responsibility, the very lessons I had to learn the hard way." And maybe one day, she could forgive herself completely. For now, she whispered softly into the night, "I have lost much, but I have gained more. I have my children, and I have the chance to build a life worthy of them. The past may haunt me, but the future is ours to shape, and I will not waste it." As she closed the window and turned off the light, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. She was no longer the reckless girl who sought love in two hearts. She was a mother, a protector, a survivor. In that moment, Isiosa finally understood. Life's hardest lessons often lead to the strongest growth. She had fallen. She had burned. But now, she was rising, ready to embrace whatever came next. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share with friends, and subscribe for more amazing tales.